Yes, that's right. The D wave. And that is going to be so prominent on tonight's show. But you don't come here to listen to me. You come to listen to the man himself, Mr. Anthony Patch. You can find his work over at anthonypatch.com. Tony, here we are again, man. And how are you doing, sir?
Very good, and thank you very much for the great intro. You're such a radio professional. I love it.
One of these days I'll get my own show. Oh, that's right, I do. And before we go anywhere tonight, because we're so listener orientated, they're so important to us, Tony, I know you want to give a shout out to a few people tonight.
Yeah, as usual, I have, Rebecca and Karen and Sarah and Julie and Christine, and it's kind of the ladies club, sort of sounds like. But there's Michael, and there's Robert and Mark and Porcupine. He's out there as well. Kim, that's a gentleman, by the way. These are the core group of people, and I probably missed a couple of names, but these are the core group of people that just barrage me, and I mean that in a good way. An avalanche of information.
Right, because you've got kind of something similar to Johnny Whistle's going on here. You've got like your own kind of core kind of group building up around you, and it must be this kind of older kind of gentleman look you've got on, Tony. That's what it is. It's just irresistible, man. That's what it is. No, I'm only joking with you, but on a more serious note, you'd like to send out some prayer requests for some people tonight.
Yeah, one gentleman in particular, Michael is his name, emailed me this morning and let me know that his sister will be hospitalized and undergoing radiation therapy for brain cancer this coming Monday. He's a great Christian. I really ask for everyone to give your thoughts, your prayers, your best wishes for Michael's sister. It is an aggressive form of brain cancer. It is a relapse. So this is not looking real well, but this is a Christian radio show. And I ask that those that are believers put forth your prayer, because where two come together in prayer, your prayers are heard and they are answered by our Savior, Jesus Christ. So I want to just read one piece of scripture like I did last week, the same one, because it's appropriate to our discussion today, and that is Genesis 1 from the King James Version. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And that's our mission statement. And I live by it, and I swear by it. So, Kev, take it away.
No, absolutely fantastic there, Tony. And I echo your prayers for Michael. Now, before we even get going tonight, one of our listeners in the chat room, Sarah Snyder out there, she contacted me during the week, Tony, and she had sent me one of these videos. Now, we were talking in the emails about a lot of these anomalies that are seen in the sky right now. We've got grid patterns. Now, Sarah sent me one with what looked to be like some kind of second sun anomaly. And I sent her a video back where I had actually done one way back when I started YouTube. And what I'd done was I combined still images with an actual moving video of what I was looking at, Tony. And I was trying to demonstrate the fact that digital cameras, there's lens flares, there's a whole number of different artifacts that can turn up, errors basically, when you're converting that photons into a digital image. And just your thoughts for some of the listeners out there, because this is a common thing. And because we had mentioned it as well, these skylines, your thoughts on all that kind of stuff, Tony?
Yeah, a couple of the emails that you and I traded earlier in the week was related to what appears to be sort of like the Truman Show, the movie in which he suddenly realizes that there's a dome, an artificial dome, a construct, a matrix over his head. And he's living within this matrix. And that, is related to this whole discussion of we are living in a quantum computer, that we are a construct of a quantum program. And I will say this, it is not beyond the realm of possibility that this is a hint, that this is a precursor, this is a beta test of Project Bluebeam. And full disclosure, I believe that this whole alien agenda that will be disclosed will coincide with Project Bluebeam, and that, in fact, Project Bluebeam, because of the aerosolized spraying, the chemtrails, and the heavy metals, they have been building this Truman grid pattern around the world. Now, we've talked about the sentient world simulation and in silico and in silicon, in computer simulation run by D-Wave's quantum computers, but I'm talking about outside the computer environment, in which what we are surrounded in, what's being picked up by on these digital cameras and even night vision goggles and this sort of thing, may in fact be an artificial grid pattern in the atmosphere that's been constructed because of all of this terraforming of the atmosphere. And we are seeing hints of it and glimpses of it because purposefully it reinforces the narrative that we are nothing more than a quantum simulation within a quantum computer. So that's my take on it.
And absolutely. And my advice to anyone out there, when you see it's more the satellite photos now, when there's lines, anomalies on that, always go and check people that really do study these things, because commonly you'll find that it is known errors in the software or in the satellites themselves. Dabu posted a video the other day. It showed lines stretching from the South Pole all the way up to the West Coast, just off where you used to stay, Tony. And when I took it to one of our guests that we've had on the Kev Baker show. He stays down in New Zealand, and he goes by Dazza the cameraman. He's got a group on Facebook called Vortex. Now, he actually went, asked some of the group members, came back and totally cleared it up, because it's a known error that does occur on that software. And I just bring that up because just do your own research as well. And I'm sure Tony would echo that, because there's a lot of really clever people out there on YouTube. You just got to know where to look and look for the right one. But usually, Tony, they can take the fear and the unknown out of these things.
Yeah, I think, the fear-mongering isn't necessary. I think that if just a critical analysis and rational presentation of what appears to be evidence, what appears to be factual, just present it. Just don't, try to scare the hell out of people. It's not necessary. Again, I'll say that we're seeing these glimpses of a grid pattern in the atmosphere. Think of it in psychological terms, because I always tend to default to the psychology of things. And that is that if you show people hints of the evidence, you don't show them the whole thing. You just show them a little bit, and they go, ooh, that's what they've been talking about. They've been talking about we're living in a matrix. And there's some evidence of it. And then eventually they show the whole thing. They show the whole matrix in order to say, in the spirit of full disclosure, we're telling you, yes, we in mainstream science, we are the priesthood of science. We have all the answers because we are scientists. We're telling you, here's the proof. It's a quantum simulation. There is no God. That's what they're going to tell you. It's all psychological. It's all for control.
We've had our man Elon Musk. He's already hinted at the fact we're in a simulation. They are building up to something, and it's a good point that Tony makes. Now then, Tony, today, again, we put our waders on. We make it sound like it's hard work. But we watched a really long presentation, and this has opened up yet another rabbit hole. And it's the D-Wave. We're back at D-Wave, Tony. You know I love this topic. D-Wave to me is CERN to you. It just sets my mind on fire. Some people would find the presentation that we watched quite dry and quite boring, probably. I'm sure me and you were on the edge of our seats taking notes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've got pages of notes in front of me.
It's taken things to a whole new level, or since we're talking D-Wave, let's just say it, a whole new dimension.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to tell you, folks, I'm going to warn you. If you want to tune out, go ahead and tune out, because this is going to get technical. And we did this 2 Fridays ago when we talked about strangelets and stuff. We got really deep, and then we took a break last Friday and tried to have some fun. Well, we're back into the deep stuff, and this is not woo. We're talking hard science here. We're talking about quantum physics as they relate to quantum computers. And what I'm getting at here, for those of you that do have a background, let me back up. I want to lay the foundation here. I want to acknowledge our audience again, because that's why we're here, is for you. This isn't for Kevin and me to talk on the radio. You know, we talk enough off the radio. You, as an audience, know more about D-Wave, quantum computers, particle physics, CERN, genome manipulation, DNA manipulation, than really most people in the world. I'm not even going to put a percentage to it. I've had some professional people in the engineering world contact me over the last 2 weeks, completely unsolicited, who happen to have been listening to some of our shows, both on Kev Baker and with me, and Kev Baker here on Fridays. And they've been telling me that, do you guys understand that you're the only ones talking about this on the entire internet? The stuff that you are talking about doesn't even get circulated in mainstream science, corridors, hallways, water cooler discussion, because they're so compartmentalized. What I'm getting at here is, you as an educated intellectual audience know more than most of the population of the world. And in fact, what you've been exposed to is so outside the norm of mainstream science that even those within mainstream science who are Christians, who are contacting me, and they're saying, nobody dares to talk about the things that you guys are talking about. You're bringing the hard science. You're bringing the facts. You're bringing the non-fear porn discussion of this information to the public. But we're not even allowed to talk about it amongst ourselves, the things that you and Kev Baker talk about. Now, I'm only saying that for the audience's benefit. That's not for me and Kev. We don't need the pat on the back. I'm saying that you guys now know more than most of the people in this world about these topics of DNA, quantum computing, and particle physics as it relates to CERN and D-Wave and DNA, because it's all about particle physics. So, Kev, what do you think about that statement?
No, I have to agree with you. And having watched a presentation today, I'll big us up as well, because you know what? We managed to make this stuff fun for the listeners, because when you listen to the people who are working at D-Wave and really know the science and stuff like that, it's very dry. It's quite hard to listen to for a long time. And at least, Tony, we can keep the listeners almost entertained along the way as they learn right at the cutting edge of science. It really is. I mean, we're even covering stuff that they're not putting out in public. So this is way ahead of the curve stuff.
It is. And so I welcome you as an audience, and I would encourage you to pass along the information as well as the source of your information, that it's coming from us, and get the word out so that other people can be benefited by this information. It's got nothing to do with Kevin and me benefiting from it. We're just geeks. We enjoy this stuff. And I got to tell you, the presentation we were watching was one of the lead scientists from D-Wave doing a presentation at CERN. Now, I want to reinforce that, because I have said for years that D-Wave and CERN are interchangeable, that they're in bed with each other. And just the fact that this presentation, which was on the CERN archive server, and this was just about a week and a half ago that this presentation was made, shows that they are working together. And in fact, in the presentation, they were talking about the Higgs boson, the God particle, and the fact that D-Wave's computer can sort through the data that's generated from the collisions much more efficiently than any of the standard transistor-based computers, the supercomputers that they have as servers, racks and racks of servers at CERN, 100,000 servers there, as well as distributing through the ESNet 5, the Energy Sciences Network 5 system, to over 160 laboratories around the world. The data generated from collisions is analyzed, and even at that, it takes them 6 months to confirm, well, to a 75% probability, confirm the Higgs boson. It took them 6 months to do that after the collisions took place. Well, that's a factor of, there's only about 1 in a trillion occurrences of the Higgs boson, if it actually is there. But I digress. The point here is CERN is tied to D-Wave, and D-Wave is analyzing the data and will be responsible for the portal. The presentation today was, hey, we can sort out the data and confirm that Higgs boson for you a lot faster than your mainstream transistor gate model computers. And that's where we're going today. We're going to talk about AI today. We're going to jump into it here real deep when we come back. We're kind of laying the foundation in this first 15 minutes or so, or 20 minutes of the show. And after the first break, I'm going to launch into it really deep. But we're going to be talking about, for those of you that understand quantum computing, and I know a lot of you that are listening do understand it, as I said earlier, we're talking about a paradigm shift in quantum computing. D-Wave announced in this presentation to CERN that they have a new generation of quantum computer. And I'm going to release to you today, and I think we're the first ones to break it, because they haven't even, D-Wave has not even published their paper on that, which is coming out later this year. Their paper announcing this paradigm shift to a new generation of quantum computers, still using qubits. But I'm going to describe for you the name of that system. How it operates is it's called sampling. Now, we have talked a long time about optimization, combinatorial optimization, and quantum annealing and quantum tunneling. Optimization, in short, is how they take all of the probable solutions, insert them into parallel dimensions, and retrieve multiple solutions. Well, that's the key. It is now a shift from optimization to sampling. So if you're taking notes, optimization is the old system at D-Wave with their old computers, even the 2000Q that was just sold to Temporal Defense Systems. And Kev, I'll let you jump in and give the names of the other companies with the 2000 model, but the point here is they're moving from optimization, pardon me, to sampling. And I'll break that down and I'll give you an explanation of why sampling is so important to our world, our everyday living. And it moves from sampling into working as a classifier of information. So we're going to talk about the new machine, but not until we come back from the next break, because I really want to set this thing up. Kev, go ahead and talk about the companies that now have the 2000Q besides Temporal Defense Systems.
Yeah, because that's kind of something we missed, and I certainly didn't comprehend that when we heard that Temporal Defense Systems, this encryption company, cybersecurity company, had bought the new model, the 2000Q, which is a 2048. I didn't appreciate the fact that everyone who had the other model, the older model now, was it the 2000X, Tony?
The 1000.
1000? Well, what the companies actually chose to do was swap out their chips. They basically had an upgrade. And the companies that chose to do that, I mean, some of them include Google, NASA, USRA, and even Lockheed Martin, to name but a few. Now, you've got this other company, Temporal Defense Systems. They've got one. And the thing that also struck me today in this presentation was the fact that the amount of unknown companies, and we've got universities as well, that are accessing the quantum cloud. They can actually use the quantum processing power of D-Wave via remote locations. It's amazing stuff, and it really does beg the question, Tony, as to, well, we know where they're going. We'll be going with that after the break, but it just shows you it's really out there in the real world now. We've got Virginia Tech. They're using it there. in association with DARPA, no less, and other US intelligence agencies. So here we have a direct connection between D-Wave and the spooks. And of course, Eric Ladzinski, the brain behind it, he came from a DARPA-funded project in the first place. It's got money, the money's coming out their ears, and I think you'll probably have details there of this latest round of funding that they've secured.
Yeah, they just acquired or were provided an initial $30 million with another $20 million coming if they meet certain criteria, certain benchmarks. But overall, $50 million from a pension fund in Canada that is investing in this Canadian company. This is Burnaby, British Columbia, D-Wave's headquarters. And so the largest pension fund administrator or investment group in Canada is investing in their own people in D-Wave to the tune of $50 million. They'll be building a new facility. And that facility is going to house the new computer manufacturing equipment that I'm going to present to you today. After this first break, I'm going to give you the name of that. I'm also going to go ahead and tell you something right up front as we go into the break. And that is that academic circles, research circles, as well as major computer companies that are traditionally involved with transistors have been pushing for what they consider to be the ultimate, and that is what they call the universal processor, the universal machine, the end all. Well, that's not the right target. And D-Wave has a different target. But here's the point. At the very end of this hour-and-a-half presentation at CERN made by D-Wave, one of their lead scientists presenting this material, the very last sentence that he put out there, and I think when we come back from the break, Kev will play that for us. The very last sentence was that he revealed that they have a prototype universal computer, but they are not going to sell it. They are not going to release it to the public or to any corporations. And I'm going to tell you after the break why that is so important, that they actually have a universal configured computer. And we'll define what it means to be a universal computer. But what they are more involved in is selling computers for which there is a market, a commercial market. That's why they are staying within this progression of up to now 2000, which is really 2048 qubit chipset, because there's a market for it. I guess we can't blame them for that, can we, Kev?
No, definitely not. And I think we'll just leave this scientist with the last words. Take us out to break. Take a listen to this.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I think one of the things we are doing is more and more hybrid use of quantum resources in conjunction with classical, because it's not going to be the case that quantum computer comes into the world and it displaces all classical computers. That's just not going to happen, right? But there are niche applications where the quantum is the right tool, and niche applications where maybe genetic algorithms are the right tool or something. I think there's potential for hybridizing in things like evolutionary computing and genetic algorithms. I don't believe anyone's done that yet, but I do think there's potential for doing that, yeah. And differential evolution, things like that too. Yeah.
Okay, this is 6 o'clock. That's our cutoff time. So let's thank this.
Thank you all. Thank you.
So there we go, and we'll get into that after the break. I hope you've enjoyed this first segment. Now, don't forget, coming up after the Anthony Patch Show, I'll be jumping over onto the Woo Crew with Freaky Friday. And then after that, Chris and Cherie Gio, they take you beyond the veil. But it doesn't finish there. No. This is TFR. We're different. Brent Thomas, he will take you into the paranormal portal. What a night it is right here on TFR. And I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in. We'll be back in 3 short moments. Don't go anywhere. We are just getting started.
This is Truth Frequency Radio.
The wicked ones obviously under heavy Masonic influence.
They got the head of Osiris at the Vatican. In September they'll bring back to life again. It's true. What will we all do? Strange that CERN is on top of it. Now they separate the corpse and open up the gates to another dimension where we'll meet our fate. Woo-hoo. What will we all do? Strange this dark matter is what you...
Welcome back. That's Robbie Spencer with Strangelets. That's a now very famous song. I think it's breaking out all over. Maybe it'll go viral. But Robbie Spencer, thank you very much. And we have a new composition from Robbie today. I sound like a radio DJ, don't I? I guess I should go work on AM radio or something. But Robbie and his wife Cheryl are great composers, been in the business for years, BMI Records, with all the big name groups. And they've been nice enough to grace us with their talents. Kev, take it away.
Oh, there's a Mandela effect I could get used to. And of course, that is Robbie and Cheryl Spencer. You can find them in the chat rooms most time. Anthony Patches on. Tony, absolute genius, and show after show, we're both blown away, and we don't just say that for effect. I know that we really are. We can't believe our luck, and the listeners out there again.
The talent and the intelligence of our audience surpasses anything out there. I know that. You know that. The audience knows that. This is fantastic. And I got to tell you, I did not put Robbie and Cheryl up to this. I didn't suggest the topics. I certainly didn't suggest anything as far as the lyrics. This is pure genius from them. And they just send it to me. I don't know what's coming. And I just bust out laughing every time. You guys really know how to hit a nerve with me. And we are, like Kev and I, we are definitely quantum entangled, Robbie and Cheryl. And now it's a four-way. So what do you think about that, Kev?
And it's like when it's CERN, they have to wait to get the data back. They analyze everything. And we wait from show to show just to see what gem they send you, Tony. Must be an album coming, right? Surely.
Oh, there has to be. Yeah, Robbie said, they're going to do a full album. So, he has worked with and is under contract with, as I understand, just to kind of, in my parlance, he is associated with. I don't know how best maybe Robbie can say in the chat room, but he's with BMI Records, worked with them for a long time. So obviously there's a potential from a professional direction to get these two professional artists to present their forthcoming album out to the general public. And I hope so.
I've got it, man. We could film a series of videos. One of us on top of the Great Pyramid. We could have us under the Vatican rocking it, man. We could have Geordie Rose there. We could have Elon Musk.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because I said to Robbie, I said, do you guys do music videos? He said, oh, yeah, for years. Big name groups, all kinds. They got a bunch that are in the works. So there might just be a music video in our future. What do you think about that one?
Oh, and you said it's out in the desert. Can we wait till there's a big boxing fight on as well? Kill two birds with one stone.
There you go. Hey, Robbie's saying we are licensing all of these new songs next week. That is beautiful. That is fantastic because it's going to draw a larger audience to the truth. And that's what Truth Frequency Radio is all about. That's what all of the shows here, all of the radio personalities here are for. Their mission is the same as ours, to present the truth, not to scare the heck out of people, not to make people angry, but hopefully to provide truth, which equates to solutions to problems. So that's going to segue into what we want to talk about. And I'm going to give you the name of the new computer system that D-Wave is coming out with, and they will, as I said, publish a paper to this effect later on this year, and would certainly, Kev and I will break that paper out to you as soon as it becomes public. This is called the Quantum Boltzmann machine. That's BOLTZMANN. So if you just go to Wikipedia, you'll see this. It's no big deal. I mean, in terms of, I'm not saying anything that's super secret. It simply means that they're taking the Boltzmann machine system and applying it to quantum computing. We are moving to sampling and classifications, a classifier system of information sampling. Now, I'm going to make this tangible. When we use our brains and our senses, we are sampling our environment. We are not taking in definitive answers. We're taking in all of our sensory inputs, and we're putting values to those inputs. We're sort of balancing things out. We're making a collage of our sensory inputs, which are all information. And if you will, it's all digital information. It's actually quantum information. Our brain is a literal quantum computer. The issue here is that D-Wave up to this point has been processing information in a classical fashion using non-classical devices known as qubits, quantum bits. And it's kind of like you're working apples and oranges against each other. And they've been trying to solve problems utilizing combinatorial optimization through a process known as quantum annealing. All right? The basic is that they're trying to find the lowest energy state in a quantum environment, which is made up of peaks and valleys, and in the valleys at the lowest point is the lowest energy state. That's where they derive the solutions from. But now the solutions are not so much as you would derive using a classical transistor-based gate model computer running in parallel, which is what the supercomputers do that use transistors. They all run in parallel. This is moving away from parallel architecture and linear processing and single solution results, which is what optimization is all about, was basically arriving at one solution with a early generation, even up to the 2000Q just sold by D-Wave. They're moving to the Boltzmann architecture, which means you can sample, like our brain does, all of the probable solutions and not necessarily agree on one specific solution. What they're doing is saying, we're going to take all of the probable solutions and weigh them out. They're going to classify those solutions. They're going to use that in a more holistic fashion, is the way that I would call it. All of those probable solutions. And to what purpose? Kev, I'm going to test you. Why would you do sampling instead of single solution processing? Why would you take everything in and kind of weigh it out and classify it out and sift it out and try to balance it out instead of just going after one answer? What would be the application for sampling, rather, if it operates like our brains? Why would you want a computer that operates like our brain? What do you think?
Why would we want a computer that operates like our brain?
Yeah, why would you want it to be sampling instead of operating like a transistor supercomputer that only arrives at one solution?
Because it's doing everything all at once.
Just like our brain does.
Exactly.
So this is artificial intelligence. This is deep machine learning, but it is a complete departure from the previous methodology of teaching machines. And this is why this is so impactful on our daily lives, because our phones, we're going to the Internet of everything. Everything is going to artificial intelligence of varying degrees of different levels of sophistication. Your phone is kind of like, chisel and stone artificial intelligence. And then you can ramp it up to, laboratory-based, particle physics-based supercomputer AI if you want. But there are a lot of levels in between that and a lot of different applications at different levels of AI. You can't just say AI is everything. It's different levels of sophistication or complexity of AI. But how do you teach a computer? Well, what's been done to date has been force-feeding computers, is the way I translate it. And that's what I do. I take the complex science and translate it into our own everyday language. What they used was what was called a feed-forward neural network. Basically, picture, let me put it this way. This sounds really bizarre. You know what furnace filters look like? The filters you stick in your home heating system, your central air and heating system. You have filter screens. Well, you put up a series of these screens all in a row, and you start at one end and you shove data through it, and it filters and screens it out until finally at the very end, after the last filter, you have a solution. That's why I call it force feeding. That's what supercomputers do. That's how neural network deep machine learning is done today. Where we're going with D-Wave is an entirely different system. It is holistic. It is taking all of the data in a Boltzmann configuration. And for those of you that are not looking at graphics of the Boltzmann machine, you probably recognize in your own mind what the Kabbalah tree looks like, the tree of life, what that looks like. This is similar to a tree of life in that you have circles and interconnections. And I believe that this is their cue at D-Wave, is that, like we've talked about, their use of Enochian mathematics and the Enochian alphabet and the language and communicating with fallen angels. Remember, this is a Christian show. We're not talking New Age. We're not talking occult practices. We're shedding light on those practices. So what I'm getting at here is that the Boltzmann machine is very reminiscent of the tree of life in its configuration. But there's another configuration, and Kev, if you'll put up my 600-cell tetrahedron, yes, I am talking my spherical model of the universe again. And you guys that are my core audience and Kev's core audience, we've talked about this forever until you're probably sick of hearing about it and sick of seeing it. But I'm here to tell you that that 600-cell tetrahedron is the universal computer that was announced in this presentation at CERN that I just referred to, made by D-Wave, by their lead scientist, that they are announcing the use of the Boltzmann machine. The Boltzmann machine is a configuration of quantum bits, qubits, arranged just like this 600 cell. The 600 cell, I have said for at least three years now, is the model of the universe, and therefore, if you are going to build a universal computer, you have to model it after the construct of the universe. The construct of the universe begins with tetrahedrons, and it results in this 600 cell, which is a snapshot in time. It's not the finished product. It is the replication, the outward expansion of the universe, frozen in time, is what my 600 cell is. What I'm saying is that D-Wave has announced, by way of this Boltzmann machine, way of processing information in terms of sampling, by configuring physically the arrangement of their qubits in tetrahedral patterns. Now, there's a number of papers I've shared with Kev over the years that have backed up my assertion, I should say, that the ultimate computer would have to be built using tetrahedrally arranged qubits. Those papers came out 6 months and forward since my publication of 2048 Diamonds in the Rough, my second book. in which I presented the 600 cell as the quantum computer, the ultimate quantum computer, comprised of nanodiamonds, C60 carbon nanodiamonds. Now, I'm about to get off my high horse here and let Kev have the floor again. What I'm saying is that the presentation that both Kev and I watched today, coming out of CERN, presented by D-Wave, just confirmed everything that I said to you. And that is that their undisclosed, will not be released to the commercial or public sector, ultimate computer, the universal prototype, they call it, is in fact my 600 cell tetrahedron, as I have been saying for years. Kev, go ahead.
Absolutely. And you know, Andrea in the chat room, you're so correct. They copy, not create. And that is why you see Eric Ladzinski, Easy Eric, my big pal, you see him all those years ago attending a quantum consciousness presentation, because what they're literally trying to do is copy the effects of the human mind that give birth to consciousness. And if you think of our brains like a computer, then these quantum effects in there, the output, the actual program that it runs is consciousness. And that's what they're trying to attain with these D-Waves. And Tony, I'm going to big you up. And let's big up Johnny Whistles on this one, man, because another confirmation for your Diamonds in the Rough book all these years later came the other day, because we're talking about nano diamonds and stuff like that. And this comes from Space Daily. And the headline is Unpolarized Single Photon Generation with True Randomness from a Diamond. Now, to put that into layman's terms, we're talking about quantum effects within a diamond, qubits, Tony. And of course, that takes us back to the stuff that you've led me into in the past.
That's why I called it 2048, Diamonds in the Rough, because 2048 is Shor's algorithm, the basis for D-Wave's computers, and diamonds because it's quantum nanodiamonds in quantum entanglement, C60 carbon. And again, a tip of the hat to the inspiration for the whole tetrahedron discussion goes back to R. Buckminster Fuller saying that the simplest geometric form that can enclose a volume is a single tetrahedron, and therefore the entire universe, from the quantum scale to the cosmological, consists of these tetrahedrons. There is no Big Bang. And I shared with Kev and some other people my draft paper that I am about to complete here regarding that. And it is, the question is the title, and that is singularity requirement, question mark, singularity requirement. In other words, does there actually have to be a singularity to the universe? Why does there have to be a starting point that is finite? Could you not have multiple singularities at the outer limit of a spherical arrangement that then causes the spontaneous replication? It is division through multiplication. Now, this again comes from Buckminster Fuller, but it's a basic theorem that is used in physics in terms of explaining the multiverse, whatever 5 or 6 different models of iterations of explaining multiple universes and multiple dimensions. It comes down to this, and that is everybody's bought off on the Big Bang except Kev Baker and myself in our audience, because everybody assumed that there had to be a single starting point. Well, not necessarily. And this is what I often talk about is 180 things. Turn it 180 degrees around and then examine it, then question it. You might see the solution, you might see the truth. And I'm going to take the 180 to the singularity and say, no, there's multiplicities. Because Buckminster Fuller says, and multiple theories of the universal model say that you can have multiplication through division. So let that sink in for a moment. Think in terms of how a cell divides, how the mitochondria reproduce. We grow from the egg and the sperm through cell division. we multiply through division and result in the human body, as well as everything else that is in living form. The universe operates the same way. It's multiplication of tetrahedrons through the division of the first tetrahedrons. Now, there could be one, if you want to do the singularity, or there could be multiples already arrayed in a spherical arrangement that then multiply through division inward towards the center. Now, that would predate what we see empirically. Empirically, using our tools of measurement in science, we see the universe expanding. But that could be after there was first an inward, not a collapse, not an implosion, but an inward from the outer shell, and in replication of tetrahedrons towards the center of the universe. And once it reached that point of completion, it then did a 180. And the 180 is what we see now as the expansion of the universe from what was a singularity that was formed from the first universe. We could be in the second universe, the second cycle of it. So I better stop there.
Yeah, it would almost be like a rebound effect. I mean, if we picture it like a bubble, Tony, as one of these other bubbles expands off or replicates to fill the space, then the two kind of compress together at push in. And then as everything resettles, it expands again. So we could well be witnessing that second half of the process.
That's my view of it at this point. And I think that what we're seeing going back to D-Wave, we are seeing that process being replicated in the construct, in the arrangement of their qubits. I think that they are following that process of how the universe replicates itself. They started at the quantum scale, and they built outward using quantum entangled particles. Okay? Same thing that's going on at CERN. CERN's trying to find the singularity by breaking things apart. Okay, everything starts at the quantum scale according to mainstream science. But it's phase 2 of the cycle in the way that we're presenting the universal model. And finally, D-Wave is catching up to Kev Baker and Anthony Patch. So now I'm really full of myself.
And again, just count yourselves very lucky that it's myself and Tony that have to sit through their presentation. Trust me, it is dry.
Well, we're about to go to break, and when we come back, I am going to get into some very deep technical stuff that we'll translate it, but I'm going to put it out there for the computer scientists out there, some of the terminology, and then we'll break it down from there. Okay? What do you think, Kev? What are you going to do with this?
It sounds pretty good to me. I'm just sitting here. I'm actually just still trying to get over the fact that we watched that D-Wave presentation and our brains didn't explode. I'm watching the chat room. Everyone is loving this tonight, Tony. We've got a good way of gauging this audience. Fun last week, this tonight. Who knows where we're going next week? Join us after this.
Real people, real radio.
Initiating the truth frequency.
This is Truth Frequency Radio.
Now they separate the quarks and open up the gates to another dimension where we'll meet our fate. Woo-hoo. What will we all do? Strange, this dark matter is what you get. Quantum computing is reality, and D-Wave systems now holds the keys to hell. I think the world just fell. Strange this, demons are what you get. When a wave starts running on the 8th of May, they will ramp up the power.
All right, thank you, Robbie. Another famous composition there. We were talking about the universe, and Kev is with me, and we've got just about an hour to go here, and it just screams by. There is no time. In this world of quantum entanglement between Kevin, myself, and our audience, time does not exist. So, with that said, Kev Baker, there are how many pieces? Let's just call them pieces. The universe. How many pieces are there in the universe? Call them particles, planets, planetoids, black holes, aliens, whatever. How many pieces are there within the universe according to mainstream science? Give it a guess.
Bajillion, gazillion.
That's probably what it is. It's 10 to the 69th power.
Oh, wow.
Whatever that is. 10 to the 69th. Now, D-Wave with their 2000 Q model. That's 2048 qubits to be more specific, because it's a 2048 chip. They process 10 to the 300th power of bits of information. And that is beyond the scale and scope of the universe. So I said they're trying to model their computer after the universe. Well, in this case, in terms of processing information, they've exceeded the number of pieces, particles, whatever, in the universe. Now, their processing chip, when they program the chip, when they put information into those chips, they're using combinatorial optimization, like we were saying earlier. That's the old system. Now we're moving to sampling, away from strictly an optimization process with the old computers to actually taking in all of the probable solutions and weighing them out. Because our brains, when we observe with our senses and take in information from reality, our learning, how we learn, is through sampling. And this is where artificial intelligence is shifting the paradigm in how they conduct deep machine learning. There is a thing called supervised generative learning. Now, this is how they use the old system, the old force-feeding system that I was talking about, using the feed-forward system of filters in order to arrive at a solution, and a single solution. That was called supervised generative learning. So they were teaching the machine with human interaction, human supervision, just like you would do as an adult with a child that you're teaching. Now where they're going in the new paradigm is to unsupervised learning. I call it ugly, UGL, and I throw the Y on the end because that's the question. So I call it ugly as an acronym, but unsupervised generative learning. Make note of that, because in the magazines, in the blogs, even in YouTube land, you'll start hearing people throw that around, but you're hearing it first here with me and Kev. Unsupervised generative learning is how they employ this sampling of information derived from the qubits in order to teach the next generation of artificially intelligent computer at whatever level and scale of application. Because as I said earlier, there's different levels of AI that exist out there. Now, there's another shift that I want to tell you about. There's been a lot of paradigm changes that we've presented already. The other is moving away from GPUs. In supercomputing, in parallel supercomputing using transistors, they moved to GPUs, graphical processing units. And that was derived from the gaming industry. And the gaming industry sort of led the way into artificial intelligence, just to make it simple. We are now shifting away from using the GPUs for teaching machines, for artificial intelligence programming, to this unsupervised learning of all of the qubits in a Boltzmann architecture, a Boltzmann machine architecture, in which you have co-processing taking place simultaneously amongst all of the quantum entangled qubits. I don't want to be too technical here today because it'll bog things down. But go ahead.
Well, just to compare it to what they're using just now, they say, and I found it really interesting, it was when he was talking about the current model, not this new Boltzmann that you're talking about, but the D2000Q. And he was saying that the qubits, they are entangled in pairs, and you've got one set, they can be carrying out a computation. And the computations that they're carrying out actually affect their entangled body. And they start carrying out quantum computations of their own. Now, when you're moving up a scale again here to this new configuration that's based, let's just say it, on your 600 cell, are all of the qubits entangled with one another at the same time?
Yes, they are. And they have to be in order to maintain their integrity, or what they call coherence, so that you don't get errors working into it. And that's what they were finding, is that they were actually taking the classical model of computing and trying to make it work with qubits. What they're now doing with this Boltzmann arrangement is saying, we're going to take the qubits and we're going to teach the classical model computer. We're going to supervise through our unsupervised learning. So first, you take the qubit-based computer, the quantum computer, and it learns in an unsupervised, let's call it a random way of taking in all information, just like our brains do. Our eyes, our ears, all of our senses randomly acquire information, randomly sample. That's what their new paradigm shift is with D-Wave, is to do this unsupervised gathering of data. Now, the new paradigm is, rather than try to take a transistor-based supercomputer system that may be AI to a limited degree and try to teach the quantum computer to become AI, it's allowing the quantum computer to teach itself, to do its own deep machine learning, and then pass that downstream in a more simplified fashion to the supercomputers and further down the tier. So you can do the heuristic, as it's called, the higher level processing of complex problems in the quantum computer, because it's specifically designed for discrete, it's called discrete factorization, discrete algorithms. So you take a very specific problem and you process it in the quantum computer because it's the most efficient way to arrive at samples of multiple solutions to a problem, and then pass that on as a group of solutions, or even distilled down to, or classified for the application that the transistor-based computer can use. So it's like it's digesting it in the quantum computer and then passing it over to the transistor computers to carry on the easy tasks. That's the simplest way I can explain it. So we're, Intel and people like that, IBM, they're all going towards the holy grail of the universal computer. And yet they're going the wrong direction. They're going towards trying to achieve something that may be unachievable using transistors, because you get to a point in terms of processing speed where if you try to pump any more energy into those chips, you're going to melt them. So you have a threshold, you have a tapering off in which the efficiency, the processing speed plateaus out, and you can't go beyond that. So they may never reach the universal level of computation that they seek. So I said the quantum computer, the chip, it takes 100 microseconds to input the information, the problem, into the chip. And with the 1,000 qubit model, which is now old, it took 20 microseconds to process the information. With the 2000 Q that was just sold to Temporal Defense Systems and now to Google, et cetera, it's down to 5. So we've made a jump from 20 microseconds down to 5 microseconds of processing speed. Now, that's not all of what encompasses how it processes the information. That's just something that's tangible that people can wrap their heads around. So go ahead, Kev.
There's talk in the chat room that, quantum computers might just be a total scam, no such thing. And it's just a machine that is taking advantage of quantum effects that are happening naturally in the universe. And, one palpable, one kind of physical thing that we can look at, and I got this from this presentation today, and I shared with you before the show, this is the kind of thing that inspires me. And if we were living in a world with people all like us, it would be this would be the kind of thing. Quantum computers would be great. And it was talking about the fact that in the real world, these quantum computers, because of the optimization, and that's really the big thing with D-Wave, it's optimization, it is able to crunch the numbers. And it's led to advancements in radiotherapy, so much so that it's able to target specifically the tumor. And then not only that, but it can protect the good cells around about that. And Tony, that for me, that's something physical that not only proves that these quantum computers are helping us in the real world, but that makes real physical change. And in the end of the day, despite all the science, or not despite, on top of all the science, we really are looking for solutions.
Yeah, and I agree that there are some great medical applications to quantum computing. In being able to target radiation therapy so that you're not unnecessarily damaging other tissues, organs, and systems within the body. And I'm all for that. The unfortunate side is that I do a 180 on the presentation, and I think, yeah, that's just for public consumption, because understanding the ultimate applications, which is control of people, that's the definitive. If you have to have a singularity to the discussion, it's all about controlling the human population. And then you back away from that with the different levels. Go ahead.
That kind of, sorry to interrupt you, Tony, but that kind of brings me into what I was going to bring up there, because just listening to you, you talk about control, and social media for me, it's a tool of control as well. And I was watching a presentation it was an interview with Eric Schmidt the other day. Now, he was talking about neural networks and machine learning, and he was explaining how this was tried a long time ago, but basically the kind of brains at the time that were working in that world, they just left it. They didn't think there was any advantages to this at all. They revisited it, and like Tony's been explaining today, we've got things like supervised generative learning. Now, we all use social media, and it wasn't that long ago. And maybe I'm totally off the mark, Tony, right? Because you're talking about humans teaching the AI or teaching the qubits, however you want to explain it. But we were offered photographs, say, just for example, 8 random pictures. And it would say, select the 5 pictures that are vegetables. Now, was that us as humans inputting data to the neural networks that were then taking that, optimizing everything they were getting back from us to the point where it eventually one day, as Eric Schmidt says, turned around and recognized a cat in a video on YouTube?
Yes. I think that in his own mysterious ways of talking, he's actually saying this.
Yeah.
And this, huh?
He is. I'm glad you say that. When you listen to this guy, he speaks in riddles, man.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is all coded. And that's not conspiracy talk. This is all coded dialogue. When we listen to Gordy Rose and stuff, it's funny. Let's back away just for a second. If you want to talk in terms of mystical stuff, when you think of our brains taking in information, our observation of reality, our brain is processing that, and we're conscious of it. And there's a whole discussion about what is consciousness. But the mystical, if you will, or I don't know how else to put it, is that our eyes are not necessarily just taking in light and photons and information, but we're actually, through our eyes and perhaps even our brains, projecting information into the environment. And therefore, it goes into that whole philosophical and mystical discussion of, is this a quantum environment, a quantum reality? Because we are projecting it physically from our eyes and electromagnetically from our quantum brains to create this quantum environment reality that we see and interact with. Are we ourselves providing that reality for ourselves? I don't want to go down that rabbit hole today. That's for a whole nother show, and I think we should do that show, talking from the starting point of what is, let's define what is consciousness and what is reality. What I'm getting at here is that we're getting to the point in science where the physical, the spiritual, the philosophical, the theological, the moral, the ethical, all of those discussions are coalescing into a single point of discussion. We cannot avoid the moral and ethical. I'm going to take it right down to that point. We can no longer kid ourselves about discussing the moral and ethical implications of science in general, and to be more specific, the discussion of AI. So if we get into talking about consciousness, of course, we have to look at consciousness in terms of sentient awareness on the part of an AI system and different levels of that awareness and sentient status. But we have to discuss that. And I know from the people that have been communicating to me in the last 2 weeks from the professional ranks of scientists and engineers who are sending me information, who are Christians, they agree with me. We are at that point where we have to actually talk about the moral and ethics of science now. We can't sidestep it anymore, because now we're getting into, do AI systems have rights?
Well, you know, Tony, I'm glad you bring that up, and I'm no fan of the EU, you know that, and my leader in Scotland, if we get independence, she's determined to take us from Westminster to Brussels. But when it comes to this kind of thing, I'm really encouraged, because they've already had like panels meeting about robot rights. Now, there's two ways you can look at this. You can look at the robot apocalypse way, but the harsh reality is that these robots are now entering the workplace, and it is, we have to face the issues that are going to arise from that, both moral and ethical. I mean, look at the robot revolution, as we can call it, Tony. People in my old line of work, security work, they're not going to have jobs for too much longer. We're also going to have these automated cars. And this week, just this week, we found out that D-Wave are involved in the car industry. They have synced up with a company called Volkswagen, haven't they, Tony?
Yeah, and the public consumption dialogue is that they're studying taxis in, I think it was in Tokyo, the traffic patterns. And again, this goes to optimization. D-Wave started with the puzzle, the riddle of the traveling salesman. And he was given a city map, and he was to try to map out the most optimal route during his day of knocking on doors and selling his wares to be most efficient with his time and energy, biggest bang for his buck. So it was called the traveling salesman problem. And that's literally where D-Wave started in their thought process of devising how they're going to program and how they're going to operate their computers. So what you're talking about with Volkswagen and the taxis and their observation of the patterns of traffic flow and utilization of taxis, and eventually moving to, as Kelsey in chat just said, driverless cars. Yes, the autonomous vehicle discussion. Okay, we're getting into rights We're getting into liberties. We're getting into laws and liability issues when we talk about autonomous vehicle operation. This is what Volkswagen, as well as every other car manufacturer, is looking at, and Google is going to build their own cars, just like Tesla has been building their own cars. The world is about autonomous vehicle. Why? Because it's control. Am I crazy when I keep coming back to control? No, because if you're denied the ability to drive a vehicle, you're denied your liberty, your freedom of movement. That's control. Where are the vehicles available? Oh, you live on a farm? Sorry. If you live in the city, we got lots of them.
Tony, get this as well, because Elon Musk, I am his biggest fanboy, ain't I? But he was talking about his Tesla company, and obviously automated cars high on his agenda later this year. I think it's in July. He's actually going to have a driverless car. There will be a human, one of those humans, sitting in it for legal purposes. But it's going to go from LA all the way to New York. Now, when he was being interviewed, the interviewer kind of asked him, well, is just able to take the one route? And much like your traveling salesman, Elon just quite nonchalantly throws out there, oh, no, you could set this off in San Francisco. You could tell it to go down to Florida. You could basically tell it to go wherever it wants. And again, it's like the D-Wave tie-up with Volkswagen over, and it was actually Beijing, just to correct you. Sorry about that, Tony. You said Tokyo, but it's Beijing. And I'm a conspiracy theorist, Tony. You know that. And I tie everything in to the television programs. And you were blown.
Oh, not television again.
But you were blown away when I explained to you they had a machine in Persons of Interest that's basically a sentient AI. Now, it watches every single CCTV feed in the world. And when I'm hearing about D-Wave taking in the traffic feeds from Beijing, well, come on, man. You can see why I get paranoid about these things, right?
Well, it's not paranoia if they are following you.
Well, this is very, very true.
I'm gonna go back to the technical. I can't stand it any longer. I got to go back to some of the nuts and bolts of this stuff, because I really want people to realize how much research you and I do. And you mentioned this presentation, and yeah, it was kind of boring and all that stuff. But you know what's really bizarre is the fact that you and I understand the language that he's using. We know what the hell he's talking about.
It's the other day when Johnny Whistles found that quantum story and he sent it to me about the diamonds, and I kind of laid it out. I mean, I was parroting what you had told me in the past and things like that. But because with the cameras on, he's just sitting there shaking his head. He's like, it's unbelievable. It's just like listening to Anthony Patch now. Now, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but really, honestly, man, it's great. And we have such fun as well. And we're almost at the break. So, I mean, don't forget, we've got Freaky Friday coming up, and we'll be carrying this on. Well, I will be anyway. Tony's going back down the rabbit hole. And no doubt, by the time I'm finished Freaky Friday, I'll have about 4 or 5 emails waiting for me, won't I?
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know how you do it. 5 hours on the air is just beyond what I can do. But
well, Tony, we're almost on the break, right? But let's shamelessly promote something that a number of us are working on, something that you thought about and now it's coming to fruition. An e-magazine called Entangled. I've actually wrote an article. If you like my Quantum Kev, you're probably going to like this. I've seen some of your stuff, Tony. When can we look forward to that, brother?
We are really struggling with the technical end of this. I won't get into the nuts and bolts of that, but it's very tough to get the back end set up in a cost-effective manner because, you know, I don't have a lot of money to put this thing together. But we're looking at, hopefully, next Friday's show, we can announce the availability of our e-magazine Entangled. And we have Robbie Spencer, our own Robbie Spencer, has his article in there. Lynn Liaz from the Lynn Liaz channel, huge channel on YouTube. My collaborator, Chris, has her articles. I have mine in there. Kev Baker, of course, and we'll probably have a couple of more by the time it comes out. This is going to be not just hardcore science, okay? We're going to have scripture in there from a number of people that have asked, can I submit, scripture and prophecy discussions and things like that? Yeah, this is a Christian-based magazine. So Entanglement, we hope in a week will come out. We're looking at anywhere from $1 to $2 subscription per month. We're trying to keep it as cheap as we can. Again, the technical side may drive that price up. We'll see. Anyway, we're going to break. Thanks for Kev. I appreciate the plug.
Not a problem, Tony. I'm shameless like that. You should know I snapped you up after one time on my show. We'll be right back.
You must unite what has been set asunder.
We are TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
Welcome back, everyone. Unfortunately, it is the last segment already of tonight's Anthony Patch show with Anthony Patch and me, his crazy co-host, Kev Baker. A lot of people thanking us for the great show tonight. And, you don't thank us because we really are merely reflections of all of you out there. Yous are the people that rock. Before we go anywhere, I want to tell you about a special offer that TFR have for all of you out there, all of you brilliant listeners, because we've got Alexa Pure water filtration systems in at a cost that you're not going to get anywhere else. And I challenge you to go out and beat this because we're giving them away $109 if you basically go over and get your Alexa Pure filtration systems from TFR. So then, Tony, we're moving into the last segment now. We've got a good bit of information, some real scientific nuts and bolts when it gets to quantum computing. We've had a laugh along the way as well. Where are we going now, sir? I sit and wait in anticipation, and I'll keep the audience waiting just a moment longer. Where are we going, Tony?
I have to go back to my tetrahedrons. I just can't stand it. I've had
those pesky tetrahedrons.
Oh, it's like
I'm only joking.
It's like sitting on thumbtacks. Those darn tetrahedrons, they're everywhere.
I picture you, Tony, just sitting within the tetrahedron. I'm only joking, dude.
I'm not New Age.
No, I know. We know that, man. We know that. But, it's the same as Tesla as well. And Buckminster Fuller for you. And we've got Tesla for me and his 369. And it was all about the tetrahedron, Tony. And I've heard that quote often enough, and we've done shows on it in the past now. And if the listeners haven't heard them, you can check them out here or over on YouTube. And it's every last thing boils down to that tetrahedron. Yes, I laugh, but that's just because that's the dynamic we have, dude. So talk to us about that, man.
Yeah, I had some questions from my engineer friends that I've just acquired in the last couple of weeks, and they said, why arrange qubits rather than on chipsets in a, let's call it, two-dimensional arrangement? Why do you have to arrange them three-dimensionally? It sounds like a lot of trouble because in the chip-based world of transistors, you use a lithography process in which you etch the circuitry onto the chips. And actually, D-Wave does that. They use now almost an old form of computer chip lithography on the macro scale to produce their chipsets. It sounds counterintuitive because these are quantum entangled bits that are operating in a quantum mechanical environment. But in order to physically produce the chips, you have to work at the macro scale. The reason that you move from two-dimensional to three-dimensional arrangement in the form of a tetrahedron has everything to do with error, to preventing decoherence. The reason that you maintain coherence is simply because of the geometry. They face each other. Now, I don't have time today to talk a lot about quantum spin, but there's spin 1 and spin 2. And the arrangement, the actual magnetic polarization, the spin of the quantum particles that are entangled in the chips, the actual magnetic, just like a compass, the direction that they are pointing is how the quantum computer operates. It changes the direction of the compass needle, the spin, of quantum particles. And when you have them pointing in a different direction than when their resting state was, where they originally were pointing, when you change their direction, that's how they process information. Now, again, I have to be very simplistic here about this or I lose my audience. But I just want to let you know that when you're encoding bits, there's a process called logical qubits, logical importing or inputting of digital information, zeros and ones that are in a state of superposition. Now, you can use logical qubits in a two-dimensional arrangement, and that's what D-Wave has been doing up until the 2000 Q, and including the 2000 Q. What I'm saying now that they're moving into a new architecture, not just their universal computer that I went on and on about, but in a commercial application computer, they are going to arrange the qubits in the shape of a tetrahedron, a three-dimensional shape. And that is what is called a supercoherent qubit. Now, we've never talked about that on the air before, Kev and I, but a supercoherent qubit is a tetrahedral arrangement of quantum computers, quantum bits, quantum processing bits. And Kev, I sent to you a paper that I'm referring to here. It's called A Scalable Architecture for Coherence Preserving Qubits. That means when you preserve coherence, you eliminate as many of the errors in the processing of information as you can. Now, originally, this was published in June of 2006. It's just been released in February of this year, and that is to coincide with the release of this new form of computer that D-Wave was talking about with CERN. It's not by, coincidence, or they're just buddies, or, these guys are all just friends that are sharing information when D-Wave shows up at CERN, is it, Kev?
No, I mean, it's not even as if you get the guys from D-Wave doing the rounds with the TED kind of talks or anything like that. They're a very kind of specific and very elite clientele when you look at the likes of NASA, DARPA, Google, and obviously most lately the temporal systems or temporal defense systems. So when they turn up at CERN, I mean, it's not as if you can just pay them and they'll come along and speak to us here on TFR or something, Tony, unfortunately.
Okay, let's mess with the AI. Remember the last time we said that we're going to go to CERN along with Gordy and who are the other guys? Alon.
You see, even with my
Eric,
even my accent, I confuse the AI because I call him Geordie. So you call him Gordy, I'll call him Geordie, and it won't have a clue what we're on about. I've heard people introduce him as Geordie Rose. Okay, so I call him Gordy Rose because I'm originally from California and I have an accent. Here's the deal. We're talking about a Boltzmann machine. And Kev, do me a favor again, because you got all the graphics. Would you put up the graphic that is related to the Boltzmann machine? And there we go.
Yeah, that one. That's perfect. Okay. Again, each of those circles is a qubit. Okay? They're all interconnected. What you're seeing there is the physical connections called Josephson junctions. They use niobium and they use gold. The point is they're also all quantum entangled, far beyond just the graphic representation there. That's going to result in their building of the 600 cell. It's inescapable. They have to. And the reason for it is elimination of errors to maintain that coherence. So for my engineer friends out there that said, why bother with the difficulty of arranging them in a three-dimensional configuration? It's because you have the concentration of the magnetic alignment, electromagnetic alignment of the spin of the quantum particles coalescing. Yeah, the book will be out. Somebody in chat asked me, when is Coalescence coming out? Once we get this entanglement magazine off the ground and we've got some stuff in the pipeline, then we're going to finish coalescence. But this is taking priority because the information's coming at us so fast, we felt that we needed the vehicle of a magazine to get the information out as quickly as we can. So I digress back to tetrahedrons. It's all about coherence. Now it is all about the ability for the machine in an unsupervised fashion. I'm kind of wrapping things up here at the end of the show. In an unsupervised manner, it is conducting deep machine learning. It is teaching itself by observing reality and sampling it and then filtering it and then outputting it to other computer systems, traditional classical computer systems. So that's in a nutshell what's going on. But they've moved from the graphical GPUs. They're going to the probabilistic, that's a tongue twister, probabilistic graphical models. When you are sampling, you are building models. Now, here's another paradigm shift. Kev, we've talked an awful lot about algorithms, haven't we?
Absolutely. The whole world is built upon algorithms, Tony.
Well, this is now a paradigm shift. Forget about algorithms, because algorithms are linear, both forwards and backwards. They are linear processing tools. Remember I said earlier in the show, they were trying to teach the quantum computer, the quantum AI, using classical transistor-based algorithm-driven machines. Well, that's apples and oranges. It's like your stepfather trying to teach you something that you have already acquired genetically through your DNA. It doesn't work. So the DNA of the new Boltzmann machine is the fact that it can learn on its own, and it samples, as I'm being repetitive here. But why sample? Why is it just to output to other computers? No, it's for building models. And that's something else that I have talked with you about for a long time, is they're modeling human behavior. Well, not just modeling human behavior, but all of the reality. And this goes us all the way back to sentient world simulation. It is a model of our environment. So every bit of information that comes out of D-Wave's new Boltzmann machine, and I think this will be reflected in their paper later this year, is that they are generating not only accurate models of reality, but new models of reality. What reality could look like, what it could be. Forget augmented, forget virtual. That's old. Here's the new paradigm shift. The AI will construct the new model of reality for us. It will not just mimic, it will not just reproduce in virtual reality. It won't dress it up as games for entertainment, like Pokemon and the computer games that are out there. But it will actually say to the humans, here's the new model that I've terraformed for you. Now, Kev, where have I used the word terraform before? Are you there?
When we've been speaking about CERN.
We've been talking about CERN and its physical effects on the planet and the environment, and chemical spraying of the atmosphere, chemtrails. That's all terraforming. Now we have an AI system that's about to go live that processes 10 to the 300th power of information, far beyond even the numbers, the 10 to the 69th power of the contents of the universe. And it's modeled after the construct of the universe, tetrahedrons. And as I said many shows back before, that the frequency and the wavelength of its processing matches the background microwave radiation of the universe. I did a whole presentation in Knoxville to an audience there demonstrating the numbers, the actual numbers, comparing the numbers of the processing of qubits to the background microwave radiation of the universe. It's literally tuned to the universe, and now it's been built as a model of the universe, and it's about to start outputting to humans based upon its sampling of the environment what it thinks the model of the human environment should actually be. That's pretty bizarre.
Oh, and Tony, just totally in tandem with what you're saying here, and we speak about something called the sentient world simulation. Now, just this week I sent you a story, and it's about a VR company, or they were kind of VR company, and what this is relating to is the fact that they've just received $502 million in funding from SoftBank in Japan. Now, this improbable company, and it says here, all the funds from the investment will be invested in developing Improbable's technology, including its spatial operating system, distributed operating system, or spatial OS. Improbable's plans include, get this, accelerated recruitment in its London and San Francisco offices, and it's going to be creating real-life models of the real world. Exactly what we've been talking about. And it says, and this is to quote the CEO of Improbable, Herman Narula, "We believe that the next major phase in computing will be the emergence of large-scale virtual worlds which enrich human experience and change how we understand the real world. At Improbable, we have spent the last few years building the foundational infrastructures for this vision, and they've done it under the guise of being a virtual reality gaming company." Go figure, Tony.
Yeah, we're going to have to, because we're almost out of time, I'm going to pull back here and go to the big picture in just a second, because one last little bit of nuts and bolts, and then we're going to jump back to what you just said. And I'm going to answer the why. In the processing of information in qubits, they use a process called quantum annealing, or adiabatic quantum computing and annealing. They have now reached a new paradigm, and I think I've given you 6 new paradigms today, in which they call it pause annealing and the allowing of co-tunneling. We've talked about this ability to penetrate through a barrier, an energy barrier called quantum tunneling, to the other side. It's passing through walls. It's just bizarre. But that's how currently CERN's, or I should say D-Wave's computers operate. But they have gotten to the point now where they can pause that annealing process. It's like you're taking the processor and putting the pause button on it and saying, we want you to dwell there. That's the term they use. We want you to dwell there for a moment and process at that level of energy. It's a freezing of the energy level, the energy curve that's involved in annealing. And this is unprecedented. Their ability to stop the processor and allow it to just continue this co-tunneling. It's been a single tunneling up to this point. It's almost like a co-parallel processor in a transistor-based model, to give you an analogy. But this is parallel processing of quantum tunneling. Again, something that we have never talked about before, Kev. But this is why they're able to move to a Boltzmann machine of co-processing. They're allowing the processors to just sort of hover at a particular energy state and gather all their information and look at all of the samples that they've acquired and not discard any of the samples, because in a process of sampling, you want to consider all possible solutions. That's the major difference. You're pausing and looking at and assessing all of the possible ramifications of your solutions. That's what we do as humans. We will stop in our tracks and admire something in our environment. We will pause and take in the scene, take in the information. That's what they want the artificially intelligent computer in a Boltzmann configuration of qubits, in a tetrahedral arrangement of physical qubits, to be able to stop and consider the information. This is a complete departure from the previous discussions of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Rather than having it just go in a linear algorithmic processing to point A to point B and coming to a single solution, you're now going in all directions at once and considering the entire environment of the processing world and capturing and retaining all of the possible solutions in order to build a bigger picture. And that gives me a segue to what I want to pull back from. Because your statement there about building models, why? Why build models? Because there are two models. One is the analog and one is the digital. We, I will say, exist in the analog version. The sentient world simulation, its progression is towards a digital environment. But that is a digital environment only for us, not those that are in a position of power. They will not be trapped in the virtual reality of the sentient world simulation. They will not be trapped in this new virtual model. And there are multiples of models, of course, that they're moving towards. Again, it is to capture the population and control the population with a hive mind connection, a hive mind way of living, devoid of your liberties, devoid of your rights, devoid of your self-awareness, even your own sentient abilities. This is where it's going. It has nothing to do with improving our environment, of curing cancer, or any of these other conversations. This is Lucifer. This is Lucifer destroying God's creation. Thank you, Margaret, in chat. It is God's creation that they seek to destroy. Doesn't matter what religion, and we're moving quickly. Probably in September, we see Trump going to the Middle East. His whole agenda is one world religion in the Middle East, okay? If you have one form of government, one dictator leader, if you have one religion and form of government and socioeconomic structure, that is not of God. That's Lucifer. All of the religions in the world worship Lucifer.